Okay, my name is Jim Reis. I am the CFO, founder of TSI, and I put the logo up for building data as it's more appropriate maybe for this presentation, given that it's content specific. So building data is a company that we created within Technical Sales International to meet the needs for our customers in data content. And rather than shipping CDs out with software, after doing this with several companies prior to starting technical sales, we decided to get a little smarter, use web services, put it in a SQL database, make it queryable, make it extensible, and make it in a way that is servicing the industry as a whole, as a community, and not just putting it on a CD and putting it out and telling your customer, go ahead and pursue your data dreams and BIM moving forward. We took much more of a communal approach to it, being able to build the data content set for an industry, update it for the industry, and to be able to push that out to everybody. And the reason we're so excited about working with BIM-MEPAUS is because this initiative really represents that in that core of what we're doing. So my presentation here today is going to be specifically to talk about data content standards, talk about managed content, and managed content is different than just creating something and putting it on a CD. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about data standards themselves. I'm going to talk about COBie. I think it's time to start talking about COBie and start knowing what it is as a manufacturer, and talk about how are standards used within as a software vendor working between company A and company B. It doesn't have to be a pure exchange. It can be based on a technology. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that as well. And I've got some slides that I've taken from the Building Smart group, which I'm a part of in the States. So in talking about content specifically, on the MEP side, we've basically broken down content into three nice buckets for us to consider. The first is a plant, which would be something like a chiller, a pump, an air handling unit, something that requires commissioning data, something that would change from component to component, to job. There's not terribly, if you look at the number of duct fittings, for example, on a project versus the number of plant, big difference there. So as we're looking at creating content for something like a fitting versus a plant, it's very different. And the manufacturers being able to communicate their message, their products to the customers is different. That need is different than a valve, for example, like you'd see in equipment, a VV box, or yes, there is a part number. Yes, it's very specific, and yes, it'll show up in a specification. It does have performance data associated with it, but it is more of a commodity. More so, there's more standards wrapped around it. There's probably some valve manufacturers that would retort, but in general, they're pretty standard moving forward. And then you get to things like fittings and duct. You're basically just categorizing in a way that this elbow has this geometry, it's got this part number, and it associates with these labor standards, for example. And so we're doing that in three different ways. In the BIM-MEPAUS initiative, you get down into the white papers, you'll see this is very clearly spelt out. And I think it's important to talk about it here because I'm going to end up showing a little demo of the two different types, being fittings, and I'm going to show some plant with a pump manufacturer. The content specifically, as we're talking about being built for BIM-MEPAUS, the BIM functionality, the technical schedules, and the physical geometry is the goal. And the first one obviously could mean a lot of things. BIM functionality, I think we'll see some presentations later today that are going to reference what BIM functionality is. We will see it when we pass the model on to fabrication. We'll see that's BIM functionality. Anything that you're doing beyond just a 3D block or a 3D component or even a 2D component, where the actual information is driving the workflow within your company to where there's actual productivity gains that are attached to the data content itself. So that's where I'm going to head with that. There are two different types of data if you go and look at the BIM-MEPAUS, and those are basically put into two buckets. We've got the BIM-MEPAUS design data sets that we're using in the Revit models, And we also have, like Warwick was talking about, the two sets of data content that are based off of the same geometry. Okay, I mentioned that we have a SQL database that sits in the cloud. We create it at one time, and then we take that data and we push it into Revit MEP under the BIM-MEPAUS standards, which fulfills the templates and the pipe types. And we also take that same base geometry and metadata, and we put that into the map software, which we'll call it fabrication, I guess, nowadays. Although it's hard to get rid of that. That pulls down into the ITM type of file. And because they're essentially, to us, they're the same component. They reach back to the same data in the cloud to give us the same base data set. So I think it's important to note that there's actually two different types of data that we're managing as managed content. And the first one is when you go to the BIM-MEPAUS site, and when you log in, you're basically getting design content. And as we bring on manufacturers, so let's like back up a little bit. Step one was to put in design content. There's a groove, there's a copper, there's a carbon steel. Put that in the template, designers can get started right away. Now we're starting to build out more specific content. So now you're seeing right here is, this is a list of manufacturers that have been contributing to the initiative, and now we're getting more rich content, more manufacturer-specific content, okay? And that is in the Revit format, okay? This area here is the ITM. You can tell the cover flows are very similar. The interface is very similar. You also notice that when I go through that cover flow right there, there's quite a few more manufacturers in there. The map world and content has been there longer than the BIM-MEPAUS initiative. And so we will have things in there that are specific to manufacturing. If you have a generic piping system that can go pull that in through fabrication into the manufacturing software, it could be plastic, it could be a couple of different types of carbon steel, it could be copper. So there'll be more data in there, okay? I think it's important to note those two out, and that's basically fabrication data sets tied to estimating and those types of things. We will see continued integration with the acquisition of MAP in this regard. I think that's clear. So what we've been working on is the plant space and the items themselves, as far as the items being pipes and fittings and valves. So the BIM-MEPAUS initiative, for those of you who don't know, you go to the site, it's a subscription-based, CarolCAD offers it with some great training, and you go log into the site, you're going through your data set looking for whatever it is you're looking for, you find what you need, and you basically, this is an example of queuing a piece of content and pulling that down into the Revit API directly. So what's happening is the family, if it's not already in the template, okay, as we're building out more for manufacturers, you essentially are going, you're queuing the component, and you request that, complete the request, that queues that up for download. So you go inside of the Revit application, there's a Revit add-in we talked about earlier, which is a big part of the stride that we made, and that piece of content comes in, it's downloaded, it turns green. I'm showing you right here, this is actually the 2013 version of the download, and we've got a few more tweaks to make, and this will be out shortly here. So now what I'm showing you is we're getting into the equipment area, okay? And this is for the plant. We've got a template within an add-in within Revit that sponsored by PIA, helped put this together with the working group, and it specified the parameters for a pump. So there's either size there, size, and impeller. And we're not specifically asking for a manufacturer, a Grumpus pump. We could do that, but we're not doing that in this example here. And what we're doing is we're basically saying, yeah, when I fill in that geometry, you'll notice here that the specifics on that are not filled in. So AMCA says you've got all these fields you can fill in of all the non-geometry, and that's what allows us to go from design into commissioning, having all those places filled, okay? So that's been placed in the model as a design pump, okay? It could be a specific, but in this example, it's a design pump, all right? And let me go ahead and play a little bit, okay? Here's where you'll see the data sets that are not complete because it is a design pump. We're just getting started in our design. And it's just basically showing that. Now what we want to do is we want to go to the interface, the web. So we log in, and this is going to be part of the 2013 release, will be this pump generator. And what we're looking for here is we're basically pulling up a form, and we're going to select a specific pump by a specific sponsored manufacturer, Grundfos in this example, and we're going to put our pump designation P1010, okay? And then we're going to select the criteria for selecting a pump. And this data is going to be transmitted to Grundfos, okay? There will likely be something about the project also tagged to this piece of content. So when you logged in, you've got a name, obviously, in a company, and we're going to basically making a request on your behalf to the manufacturer. So that request has been made. Notification comes to Grundfos, and they go to this site here, and they log in to fulfill that request that you've made. At this point in time, in terms of the workflow itself, there's going to be communication that's taking place between customer and manufacturer. The likelihood of something coming out of the blue with a PO1 and a name and them just fulfilling it, there will be some interaction here, just like there is in the traditional method. The difference is the entry of the data will happen one time. So pulling down that menu right there, it pulled up the company name, and queued there is all this requests that I have. When selecting the highlighted item right here, it populates the data in the chart down below, okay? And in populating that data down the chart down below, in the cloud, all of the parameters for that pump to fill out the pump schedule has already happened. It's already taken place. It's just waiting to be pulled down by the user. So the user gets a notification at their Revit station, and just fulfilling the request here. And in that exact same add-in that we looked at earlier when I selected that design pump, there is a pull-down option there to also pull down and look for the queued content, okay? So Grundfos has basically fulfilled that. They've attached a PDF to that and a price to that component, okay? Both of those things will be very important for us for lifecycle analysis and also be able to attach the data associated with that. So at this point, going through here and picking the actual pump, the pump now has the geometry and it's got the data associated with it. And that's all coming directly from the cloud. This is a cloud application. When you're selecting components here, you're selecting them from the server to select those components. So when I'm typing in here my test 11 pump, what it's going to do is it's going to deliver now, real time, down to that user's box, the Revit family and the data that populates the Revit family in the CSV file to fill out the schedule. So it resides in the actual model itself. And that's a big distinction. I think it was brought up earlier today in talking about being able to have everything in the model itself as opposed to having everything referenced out. So right here, as we go through and look, you'll see the data fields are populated within the parameters of that particular pump. And I'll jump at the end here. This is the submittal data here. So this is the PDF that was attached. We're housing that submittal data so that when it pushes down a pump to one time and there's a submittal data and it goes to a different customer, it'll say P1, project name, very specific as far as what the manufacturer is delivering you. And of course, there's also part of the BIM-MEPAUS initiative is dealing with statuses and knowing what status that pump is in. So right here, if I look at this pump here, this was the first pump I placed down in the design mode. It was called test 10. And within Revit, you can select a component, go and click, replace that component, and thereby replacing that brand new, that new manufactured delivered content now replaces that pump. CSV updates, and all the data is now populated into that pump. We think it's important to have some human intervention. We don't want to just be dropping data content into Revit files without the user know that it's affecting them, it's affecting their schedules and what's taking place within, and potentially could affect the piping system itself. So we've thought through the processes, I think, pretty clearly through the work groups that we've worked with. And so that pretty much, that wraps up how we're delivering content. And so now that we've developed the pump app to where we can deliver the pump through the cloud directly to the actual station itself. You know, working with boilers, working with chillers. The context of content creation through an app is done. It meets standards that are set by the AMCA, which is their job. And now we're basically putting the two together, okay? And you'll see this pump app delivered with the 2013 version. It is important to note that rather than just delivering the family directly or putting it in a template, how would you conceivably put in that many different variations of a pump or a chiller? It is inconceivable. You're going to fill it in somehow. It's going to have to be somewhat parametric. So we've got an engine that enables to create a template, have the manufacturers engage, enter data one time, and pass that off to the people that are actually doing the design. And in terms of how we pick that up in terms of standards, because that all resides in the cloud, adding that additional information about the manufacturer, their warranty, serviceability, all those type of things, cost, can be added to that already investment made in the data content as a community. That means everyone here that's participated in the BIM-MEPAUS can now share that growth of that cost across the entire industry, okay? So let me, is this one working here? Good. Just pull up my Revit. Someone said that they wanted to see live software demonstrations. So one of the reasons that interface I just showed, a lot of that's web-based, and I don't like to leave subject, to web connections doing a presentation. So the schedules that are generated out of the pumps that are there are defined by the AMCA. The data content is filled in by the manufacturer, is what you're seeing right here. So a design schedule, and it fills in populates the schedules for us automatically. Now, with more user input, with more scheduled data that we want to see in there, this is not set in stone. A lot of this stuff is a work in progress, and it's been very diligently gone through, but everything's always got room for improvement, okay? So I did it. I did a live presentation of some software. I'll put that in my things I did today. The pump itself, in terms of the data sets, you'll see it right here, okay? So this is all populated data sets that came directly from the manufacturer, all right? And we've categorized all this, we've cataloged all the data. So this part number at this size has all this data filled in it based on Grumpus. And we've done that in the back end. The back end's done. Now it's just a matter of selecting and pushing and selecting and pushing out the content. Okay. The last bit I want to talk about, I've got a lot of slides, but they're not going to take long to go through, and basically is to talk about standards and COBie. So what is COBie? What are we trying to do? What's the purpose? So I put this slide up here to kind of start with, and if you look at this cycle of design to operation and life cycle being the focus of creating buildings, and that's why we build buildings, by the way, to occupy them. So right in the middle there's an orange line there that says COBie. And what COBie is exchanging data. Okay, well that seems obvious. Why can't you just slap a bunch of binders together and ship them from company A to company B? All right. Well, there's probably a better way to do it, just like there was a better way to send mail before email. But before you could send an email to somebody, you had to know what is formatted, what to, from, BCC, subject line, body, okay? Before someone decided how to exchange an email, there was no way to send and receive that email. So it seemed pretty obvious, I'm sure, to people working on terminals that they needed to define that and exactly what happened. Now, the templates that have to be created for exchanging data for complex pieces of equipment like pumps and chillers and whatnot, yes, it is more involved. But those standards are being completed and are being worked on, and COBie is the exchange for that. And to go from building models to the data content and to the management of that, there has to be an exchange of data, okay? It just doesn't happen. You just don't go from, oh, I got my model. That's what we're talking about. How do we go from model to the content to get to facilities management? It's going to take an exchange. It's going to take a handshake of some sort that takes place. Now, it doesn't have to be IFC. It doesn't have to be pure that, but there's got to be a basis for it. MAP and Tekla worked on a project where they were exchanging data back and forth based on IFC XML, and it used the technology, but it didn't use it purely. But it met the purpose of sending the model in 3D format from map software with extended data sets, labor, where you were in the building, that type of thing, and send that to Tekla, and Tekla was able to read it, okay? So don't get discouraged that you're not seeing the COBie interface. You're not seeing the IFC XML pure software delivery. This exchanges are being used in the background in ways that you probably don't even know, okay? So don't be discouraged about those type of things, all right? I chose this slide here. Basically, that red line that you see right there is what we're trying to hurdle right now, okay? You can't do that without managed content. You can't send information from one gobbledygook, one company that has their structure of data being an A, a B, a C, and a D, and the next company has an X, a Y, a Z, and a 3, okay? When you standardize data in the proper columns, which is what the AMC does with the BIM-MEPAUS, you can translate data from company A to company B much easier to be able to meet that standard, okay? And as far as COBie itself, I think it's probably the simplest way. I didn't plan to get into deep into COBie, but I think people, to understand what's coming or how it's going to affect what we're doing, the Construction Operations Builders Information Exchange, so the IE is the exchange, and you'll see here there's a specifiers property exchange. So manufacturer says, I'm this company, I've got this address, this phone number, this is my contact information for warranty. Here is my warranty, and some of the basic information about that company. That needs to go from manufacturer into the model. It needs to go from into the model, attach more information to it, which now you're getting into COBie exchange. Where are you in the building? What data is associated with you? Commissioning times, those type of things, and then pass that on to the facilities management into basically another operations of facilities management, okay? You can do this now in a spreadsheet. It's online, it's ratified. The National BIM Committee in the United States has adopted it. When you put your presentation up earlier talking about the 2016 of the UK, they're talking about COBie mainly. They're looking at COBie, looking at data exchange to be able to meet those IFC expectations of being able to push this data out there, okay? So we're heavily involved in it, and I thought I'd take the time, part of my presentation, to talk about COBie and what can you expect moving forward with the data sets and the investment that we've all collected will be made in the data content and our software applications. As far as the data content itself and how the industry is looking at standards itself, you've got this base level of standard, the ISO standard, and then on top of that you have the exchanges themselves, and then on top of that layer back on the onion, you're basically looking at the workflows that are taking place. So as we look at standards and how they're building out within BIM-MEPAUS and how it's relating to other international standards, we are in alignment, we are cognitive as to other things that are happening out there. It's very unique with BIM-MEPAUS because in some ways, like Singapore, it is a smaller community, and you guys do have the ability to put your arms around it and pull in manufacturers and to be able to push the initiative forward. So I thought this is a good slide to show the overall. You start with the core, you go to exchanges, which is what we're talking about with, for example, talking to fabrication, that's an exchange, okay? That actually uses an IFC in the background. It's binary, but that's actually an IFC exchange that's happening. Is that part of an NDA that I'm not supposed to say that? No. It is an IFC exchange that's happening in the background. So it's one of my messages. Don't be discouraged by the fact that you're not seeing a lot happening on some of these standards, but a lot is happening. A lot of companies are using that technology. Okay? And that concludes my presentation on the data content. So thank you very much.